The one other technique I want to dive into and have you comment on for a second, and it in my mind it's a little related because, right, I have all my content, I'm anxious, I'm high energy. Talk to me about the dramatic pause.
The exercise we do in Pitch Lab is a dramatic pause can change the entire meaning of what you're talking about. So if you're delivering content, to be able to pause really gives a chance for your listener to catch up. So if you've ever been accused of, do you talk too fast? Oh, I talk too fast. I talk too fast. I have to slow down. Not necessarily. You don't necessarily have to slow down. You have to pause more. Because I think people who are high energy and they seem to talk fast, they can come off as energetic, excited, passionate, and that could be a good thing. But if I'm talking and talking and talking and talking and talking, and there's no breaths in there, I'm not giving my audience a chance to catch up. So like a graphic designer uses white space, that's how you want to use dramatic pause when you're presenting. The other piece when it comes to sales, though, is we as human beings, or at least we as Americans, we get really uncomfortable with silence, but there's magic in silence. Being able to ask a question or let someone answer a question and not having to jump right in where you're almost starting to speak as they're finishing, and let that stillness sit there. That's really an uncomfortable silence for a lot of people and for a lot of salespeople. So whether you're presenting and you need to use dramatic pause to really be heard, or you're in discovery and a conversation and you have to be more comfortable in that uncomfortable silence, there's a lot of beauty in that pause and in that silence, especially in the world of sales.
Yeah, I remember one time in a sales presentation, we had went through the pitch and we got to the investment slide. We presented it, and I said, something along the lines of, how does that feel to you? Does it feel like a good investment for this outcome? And I was quiet. And then somebody on my team spoke. And I said, I took them aside afterwards and I said, listen, I know you don't know, but that's a dramatic pause. I wanted them to speak first. When we spoke first, we lost. So because they were thinking and they were formulating their answer, and he was about to have it come out of his mouth. And then we broke the silence because we got uncomfortable. Now, that may not be what you mean in the dramatic pause, but it was there. So, and after I learned about this, I remember every time I would watch let's say a comedy show on Netflix, and I not only saw the dramatic pause, but I also watched when people grab their water. Why would a comedian grab his water? Well, what's happening? Is he thirsty?
Great question. So 2 things on that. As an MC, whether I'm doing a pitch competition or a comedy show, when you pause in the right spot, you can actually elicit applause. Or when you pause in the right spot, you can actually elicit applause from the audience. So if you do it right, you can pause and the audience wants to put something in there. When you ask me about comedians, yes, they need to slow down sometimes, but 2 things. Number 1, sometimes they truly need a drink. If you have a high stakes show, when I get nervous or when I get that stage fright, my mouth does go dry. So absolutely, that's part of it. The other piece, though, is sometimes using water is a way. So for your team or your team member, that after you said, how does that investment estimate feel? If you could have taught everybody, hey, if you can't keep your mouth shut, grab your water bottle and sip on it a little bit. It's a way to create or it's a way to engineer a pause. So sometimes a comedian wants to just wet his or her whistle, and sometimes it's just a great way to slow things down and pause. The last piece, though, before we move on to the next one, is what you need to teach your team, Chuck, is there's a difference in perception between audience time and presenter time. Meaning in our minds, When we pause for 2 or 3 seconds, we're going crazy. So whatever team member that was, they felt that silence was deafening. But the audience, the actual prospect or the client you were talking to, they weren't even probably perceiving it as that long. So there's always going to be a difference in how long you feel that you've paused for and how long your audience or whoever you're talking to feels like you paused for.